Well, once again, we are not the kind of company that is like too cool. We're so smart that we don't use libraries. So, in software development, using libraries is just a smart thing to do. It saves you time. That's what libraries are for. So, I want to make this very clear because you guys have probably heard us say on multiple occasions that we do a lot of things from scratch. Our software is a very from scratch software. We built a lot of what you see we built from scratch. Um, but that does not mean that when there's a good library, we don't use it. Okay, so for instance, we have our quick physics system, which we wrote from scratch. Only reason we did that was because it was actually easier to do that and it was less bloated, less middleware for religion VFX versus going and implementing an entire bullet physics library or an entire jolt physics library, which is like huge middleware, comes with a lot of bloat, or an entire NVIDIA physics library, which comes with a lot of stuff that we don't need. So rather than doing that, we just wrote our own very lightweight, very clean physics system for religion VFX. Okay, cool. Now, let's talk about our physically based rendering system because our rendering system is probably our highest IP, right? Because it doesn't really matter how great your features are if your rendering sucks. So that's why for years we spent a lot of time focusing on mastering the rendering rather than just bolting a bunch of features into the software. Okay. So we prioritize mastering rendering over adding a bunch of features because once you have the rendering perfect, then adding features is just more fun. So now what we did was when we started on the physically based rendering, here's what happened. Okay. So you have something called Google Filament, which is a really great library. Anybody can use it, okay? And it's something that uh, basically most people use. I think a lot of like freelancers use Google Filament. So it's something that a lot of people use. But um, the problem with this is that we try to get people to use it. We try to get our developers to implement this. In particular, I went and I hired like it was like a transverse type of person. I don't really know what they're called in this generation, like a trans man or a trans woman. But anyway, he or she was like a very talented programmer from California. And I went and I found her um, and I was like, oh my God, I saw her profile and she fit the exact description of the kind of graphics programmer that I wanted. So I went and I begged her and I was like, hey, can you please take a look at Google Filament and help us implement this into the Univah Film Engine? And she was like, okay. And so I started the contract with her. I told her how much she would get paid and everything. She accepted the payment. And so I sent her all of our source code, which is something I no longer do. But at the time, um, this was the beginning. This was towards the beginning of Univers, so I didn't mind sending source code because we didn't really have that much to protect anyway. So I sent her all of our source code, and so she was in California. She was in California while I was in Houston, and she was looking over our source code. She had built the project on her local machine in California, and uh, she was going to start working on implementing, physically based rendering inside Univers Pro. And this was way back. This was like in 2022 or 20, yeah, like this was way back. So she has my source code, and she's in California, and we have a meeting. I give her like a week to take a look at what we have. She takes a look at what we have and she's like, this is terrible. So she, that's just honestly what she said. She was like, this is horrible. I can't I can't use this the way that it is. So I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so what do you want us to do? What can we do? She's like, well, we're gonna have to basically start over. We're gonna have to basically start over and create a new architecture so that when we implement physically based rendering with filament, it it just works, you know? So basically she was saying the architecture that we had, or lack of architecture that we had, was not going to work with implementing filament. So I was like, wow. So basically she was like, okay, we're gonna have to start all over. And so we ended up starting all over. She built everything from scratch. And I was like, wow. And it took her about a month to get the architecture reset up. And then we were moving at that time. We were moving from being a Qt based software to being a Visual Studio based software. Because, again, like I've told you guys in our other videos, our developers did not like working in Qt Creator. So we were migrating at the time. We had to move everything from being a Qt software to being a Visual Studio software. So she did all of that. Okay. She did all of that. And that was step one before she even got started into trying to put filament inside of Univah. So she, and this is not what I hired her for, mind you. Okay. This is not what I hired her for. So I tell you guys all of this because we live in this generation now where people think you can just use AI, and AI is so easy. Because of AI, developing really complex software should be so easy. But if that were the case, how is it that I hired some of the best programmers from California, from all over the world, and they couldn't implement a library into Univah? So, and this was in 2022. This is like when ChatGPT first came out. So why couldn't she have just gone to ChatGPT and asked how to do this? Because it's not that simple. It's really not that as simple as you think. So anyway, um, a month goes by. She has totally changed our entire source code. She did a whole bunch of stuff I did not ask her to do. I hired this girl to implement physically based rendering into our tool. I gave her a library so that she wouldn't have to do it from scratch. Okay, that's the whole point of using a library. A library exists so that you don't have to do all the math calculations for lighting, physically based lighting. You don't have to do all the pi calculations, all the 3.14, all that stuff. Physically based rendering is not easy to implement on a production level. And having a library that has already done all the calculations, all the shaders have already been done for, for sheen, for clear coat, for glass, for metals, for metallics, for roughness. All of that's already been done. You just have to implement it. Okay. But you couldn't do it. 4 months later, this lady wasted 4 months of my time. Okay. She spent 4 months. Every week we would have a meeting. I would say, show me what you got. And every single week she would have totally changed our source code. She completely changed our project from what we had originally. And she just redesigned it to fit what she wanted so that she could work within our code. And this happens a lot when you don't supervise your developers. They're going to change everything to fit the way they like to work, you see. So those are the mistakes that I made in the beginning. I was too trusting. I trusted people and I was like, hey, yeah, just take my source code. Yeah. Yeah. And I would give them something so valuable and I would just trust them to know what to do because their resume says that they have a bachelor's degree in computer science. And so I just trusted them to know and to be professional. And she said she was a company. She said she had her own company. And so I just trusted them to be professional. And so after like 4 months of her not being able to implement, and it does not take 4 months to add a library. It really doesn't. But 4 months later, I'm like, okay, so are you almost there? Because she had basically, she told me she had implemented the library basically in totality into the engine, but it wasn't showing in the viewport. Nothing was showing in the viewport. So I was like, okay, well, when are you going to be able to make it show in the viewport? And she was like, okay, I just need a few more weeks. So a few weeks later, this is now 4 months and a few weeks. We have a meeting and she quits. She quits during the meeting. She's like, hey, I just want to let you know, um, I have to go to my trans surgery. And so she was like I said, she was a trans person. So I don't really know how much in the 4 months time that she had been working on this project. I don't know how much time she actually put toward working on the project because when I received the source code back, when she sent me the project back, because when she quit, I was like, okay, well, that's fine if you want to quit. She's like, hey, Steph, I'm sorry, but I have to go do my trans surgery. I don't know how long I'll be gone, and I don't want to keep you waiting. So I'm just going to send you back your project based on the contract we both signed. You said in your contract that I have the right to quit whenever I want. I said, yes, that's true. That is what my contract says because I don't like holding anyone hostage. So, yes, all my developers can quit whenever they want. And so she's like, well, I would like to exercise my right to quit now. So she quits and she's like, I'm going to send you back and you don't have to pay me. And I was like, okay. So she's like, you don't have to pay me since I didn't complete the project. And I'm just going to send you back what, I'm going to send you what I have so far. So she sends me the project. I compile it on my end and I'm looking at what she has. There's nothing in the viewport. Nothing. There's absolutely nothing in the viewport. And so like the viewport is blank. So we not we before at least we had a working viewport. We had something. She came, added a whole bunch of stuff, changed our entire architecture, and then now we can't see anything at all in the viewport. So we actually went backwards. So I, I hired California homegirl, and she took us backwards. 4 months later, we had less. We had less to show than what we had before I hired her. So, and then I was looking at the code, and the code was just like so. She had totally renamed everything. This is another thing. We have naming conventions. She renamed everything. Everything. She created all these new functions, not following any of our naming conventions. She renamed everything. And I was like, what in the world? I'm surprised she didn't rename the project. The project itself is the only thing she did not rename. So, needless to say, that's how we ended up not using filaments. We came so close to actually using Google Filament for our physically based rendering because as you can see here, it's good. This is PBR. It's going to give you realistic quality. It's a library. It's a free C++ library. And this is what I paid her to implement. And 4.5 months later, she left me, she abandoned me to go do her trans surgery. So and left me with nothing, with less than what I had before. So I was pretty disappointed. I was like, wow, that's 4 months of my life gone. This girl has wasted my time. I have all the I have code that is so different from what I gave her. Thankfully, I had a backup of my old code, so I just basically went back. I took whatever she created and I tossed it. Okay, I still have it in my external hard drive because I keep copies of everything. So I still have her version of our code from 2022 because again, I keep everything. But we ended up just tossing away everything that she did, and I went back to the original, and then we just built everything from scratch ourselves. So that means we implemented PBR from scratch, and thankfully, I'm so glad we did because I've taken a look at other softwares that have filament implemented in them, like DAZ Studio. I believe DAZ Studio has like a filament plugin or something like that, and it's not that great. And I don't know if it's because of their implementation of it, but we try to avoid bloat as much as we can. And that's something that I'm really proud of that we've been able to do. We try to avoid bloat, which means if we don't absolutely have to have a middleware, then we don't bring that in. if it's not absolutely necessary, then we don't want to add all these libraries and all these dependencies. If we can do it from scratch, and it's not going to be any because again, this library doesn't take 4 months to implement. But she had my source code on her computer in California for 4 months, and had nothing to show. So I was like, well, how hard can it be if we just do it from scratch? If she couldn't implement a library and it's 4 months later, surely if we just read a couple of GPU Gems books, if we read the OpenGL Bible, if we do some research on physically based rendering and subsurface scattering, surely if we read some research papers from SIGGRAPH, we should be able to do this in less than 4 months. Okay. Or at least in the same amount of time that it took my transvestite friend to, to abandon me. So she didn't do anything she said she was going to do. So I was like, okay, so that's how we ended up doing this from scratch. So that's the story there about that. She, even though we tried to use these libraries, the reason we weren't able to was because we just we would hire these developers and they just didn't know how to implement stuff. So AI or no AI, AI assisted coding or no AI assisted coding, it's she wasn't able to do it basically. So we ended up having to do a lot of it from scratch, and a lot of it was me sitting with the computer on my own and just playing with it, struggling until I figured it out. So a lot of the physically based rendering I wrote myself, even though I don't have a computer science degree. Just from reading papers and doing research, and doing a lot of research, I was able to get the Univah Film Engine to where it is now. So that's the story of how we added physically based rendering on subsurface scattering.